Aaron, we got a little bit of, before we get into this show, we got a few things to tell the audience about or sort of riff about before we jump into the show.
Yeah, absolutely. So number one thing, actually, OSCON is right around the corner. And we have been and continue to be an O'Reilly media sponsor and helping out with the community. It's been incredible. And they've been fortunate enough and really generous to offer us 2 passes to give away. Last year, I think we gave away 1.
Yep.
This year, we're giving away 2.
That's right. Because so May 16th through the 19th, for the first time, they're moving it away from Portland. They're moving it to Austin. Austin is sort of the place to have an event this year. So, OpenStack's there this weekend or next week, and OSCON's going to follow up pretty shortly afterwards. So, we can give away the passes individually, or we can give them away to 2 at a time if somebody comes up with a really awesome reason why they deserve 2 passes instead of 1.
Yeah, absolutely. And so to be clear, too, kind of details on this, it's bronze level passes. So the value on those is like $1745, if I remember, $1,745 US.
Yep.
And bronze level passes get you Wednesday and Thursday, all sessions, expo hall, keynotes, everything, as well as a 3-month subscription to Safari Pro, which is actually really, really cool.
Yeah,
as well.
Yeah, so it's basically everything except like the first day, like in-depth all-day training. So it's an awesome package. Thank you to the good folks at O'Reilly. So here's the question, Aaron: how do we give them away? What do we decide? What's the winning reason why we should give these to somebody?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think what we need to do is, it's always been about community, right? So get in touch with us either through email, show@thecloudcast.net, or through Twitter, and give us, your community story, if you will, of why you want to go to OSCON, what you plan to get out of it, and really help us out to really give back to the community.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe we need to think about this as like you're there sort of on behalf of the Cloudcast. What are you going to report back to us, or what are you going to bring that adds value to the show, or just what are you going to do to be awesome for those 2 days? Send us that. And we'll pick a winner. And we're going to have to do it here pretty quick because unless you live in Austin, you might have to make some travel plans. So.
Right, exactly. And what we'll do is we'll keep this open till next Friday, April the 29th. We will announce the winners next Friday. We'll do it. We'll announce it on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And did anyone even know we had Facebook and LinkedIn groups? But we do.
Along with Okert and other things.
And also too, if there's folks out there that either want to go ahead and get the pass right now, or as part of this contest just end up not receiving it, there is a discount code as well. So PC Cloud will get you OSCON 30% off all tickets and all levels. So if you want something beyond the bronze level as well, you can use that and apply that.
That's right. So it's PC, like personal computer, and then the word cloud. So PC CLOUD, all together, all caps. That'll get you 30% off OSCON tickets.
Yep, and we'll put all the details in the show notes.
Cool. Hey, one other thing. We got an email from some people who were starting up a podcast here recently, and we've gotten a number of those lately. And they were asking us, some stuff. Hey, how do you guys do things, and this, that, and the other, which we're always happy to share with people. In fact, at some point we need to publish our stuff because it's easier than everyone sending us an email. But one of the things they were asking us was like, hey, do you use SoundCloud, and do you use Google Play, and a bunch of these new places where media is being distributed? And of course, we gave our typical. We did something 5 years ago. We haven't changed. But it kind of got our brain rattling a little bit that we need to update things. People are very mobile these days. People listen to stuff more mobile than we do. So give folks an update of what we're going to do to give the power to the people, get the word out.
Yeah, and so this has been super interesting this week. So in particular, the Google Play kind of submitted podcasts. You can submit a podcast to them. We have submitted a podcast there. It has been approved, but I'll be honest with you, I hadn't seen it yet. So I do have Android-based tablet and my Google Play. Apparently, they're doing like a phased rollout, and I don't have podcasts if I go into the Google Play. I don't have it yet, and others don't. But some are starting to get it, some aren't. So, give it a little bit of time for Google to propagate this out to everyone. But you will be able to find us. We should, we're already in there. So when it is enabled in your region, you should be able to go search for the Cloudcast and go subscribe to it. We're also looking into SoundCloud. I admit I did kind of a very cursory look at SoundCloud because a lot of people have been asking about it. And we haven't moved over there yet solely because it seemed like they wanted to host the files as opposed to just pointing at it like, say, Stitcher or some of these others do. So we're looking into that. SoundCloud, if you're interested in it, please let us know. But it is something we're definitely investigating. And it goes into this larger kind of thoughts on kind of next generation tools, right? If you go way back to our origins, there wasn't a podcast iOS app.
Right.
And most people were like syncing and downloading to their laptop and then putting the files on their phone manually. And now over 70+% of our audience is mobile, is specifically Apple iOS based, and maybe the Google Play will change that. I certainly hope so.
Yeah.
We'll start to balance that out a little bit more. But everyone's consuming media in new ways these days, whether it's, consuming blogs, whether it's consuming websites, whether it's consuming podcasts. And so we're definitely looking at kind of spring cleaning of the podcast here and figuring out new ways and also new tools behind the scenes as well.
That's right. And, the one other so two things, like you said, people used to download them. That was the reason we never went to video, that and the fact that we both have a face made for radio. So I don't know that we'll ever get into video. I know some people do. They do it through Hangouts. We don't seem to love Hangouts for whatever reason. And the other thing is, we're all excited about the Google Play thing. It gets us into the more Android-based podcasts, but we make no promises that Google won't at some point decide, well, they're not interested in podcasts anymore and cut that off.
Right.
So don't come back and yell at us if Google does what they do and kills off a product. So
right.
We'll throw that disclaimer out there. So.
Yeah, no, and for everyone that is Android-based, I love Podcast Addict is the main podcast catcher, if you will, that I use on the Android platform these days. I love it. But it'll be interesting to see what they do with Google Play going forward, without a doubt.
Yep.
So go ahead.
So enough about us. Why don't we get to today's show? Like I said in the last one, this one's a little bit unusual. We recorded the show with Matthew Brender, who's on the Intel software-defined infrastructure team. He was talking about a very cool open source framework called Telemetry, called Snap, that focuses on telemetry. And then for whatever reason, the thing got hosed up. It had an audio glitch. It had a problem in it. We had to take it down. We've been trying really hard to recover it, and we finally recovered it. So that'll be this weekend's show. Hope you guys enjoy it. If you heard it before, you probably got part of it, and this ought to be a little bit different. So thanks again for listening for that one.
Yeah, and you might hear some edits and cuts here and there. We did our best to clean it up, but if you do hear them, it maybe it took a little more cutting and editing than usual. But certainly bear with us on that one, and we'll be back to kind of regular scheduled programming next week. Yeah.
So getting ready to. It's already May. It's hard to believe it's already May almost, and trade show season's coming. So we'll have a whole lot of stuff from events. And
you're heading to Austin, right?
I'm headed to Austin, and then I got
OpenStack,
and then we're both headed to Vegas for Interop and EMC World, and then DockerCons are around the corner, Velocity Comps are around the corner, Red Hat Summit. I mean, it's going to be a busy year, which is great. A lot of crazy stuff going on in our industry, and we'll try and sort it out for everybody, or at least make a little bit of sense of it.
Yep, absolutely. And so with that, we're going to kind of close out this intro, and right after this will be the Matt Brender with the Intel and Snap.
Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to another episode of the Cloudcast. For our podcast today, wanted to introduce a longtime friend of the show, who also represents a group of people that are longtime friends of the show. So Matt Brender, developer advocate for Intel SDI infrastructure group. How are you doing, Matt?
Hey, Aaron. It's a pleasure to be on here. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
There you go. So let's kind of start way back at the start.
Sure.
You've had kind of an interesting journey to date in getting to this role, which is relatively new for you. So if you don't mind, give everyone kind of brief intro into your journey and how you ended up as developer advocate at Intel.
Yeah, it's certainly interesting, and I'm the first to admit that the title doesn't necessarily mean much. It's kind of confusing. But it really is important in the context of what's happening in the particularly IT infrastructure and just the data center these days. So to take a step back, I came up through EMC. I started in tech support on fiber channel storage arrays, learning the engineering side of that, which was super interesting from a nerdy like tuning disk performance by RAID group and matching LUNs to that and all that kind of jazz. And I found at some point, like, I just couldn't fix the problems I wanted. So I went into engineering to fix the problems. And I found that actually most of the problems that were really bothering me, it wasn't the way the system worked. It was the way we talked about it. So I, surprisingly, in my own mind at that time, I wanted to go into marketing. And I went into the community marketing team to try to aggregate the conversation and really, bring a level of technical expertise to the way we're talking about hardware and software. So that kind of continued on, and I flip-flopped a little between really technical and marketing and up and down the stack.
You were a self-loather for a little while there.
Oh, still am. Still fight it daily. Self-loathing marketing as a service is certainly something I'm offering. But Aaron, along the way, like the community on Twitter and podcasts inspired me, so I started participating more. And I don't know, there's been a ... And as developers become more of the target audience, a developer advocate is a perfect twist to those, technical aptitude and wanting to tell a compelling story.
Yeah. And quick plug for everyone out there, too. If you're not already, go listen to the Geek Whisperers podcast. Matt is one of three on there and good friends, all good friends of the show out there, and great advice and great guests on certainly kind of career building and a lot of the problems and challenges a lot of us are facing in the industry. And really good at helping everyone kind of answer the what's next that a lot of people are asking out there, not just, technically, but as far as where you're going to go with your career. So certainly great stuff and go listen to that without it.
Thank you for that, Aaron. Yeah, it's a real pleasure. I mean, the Geek Whisperers, we all started out as kind of marketing-esque people with technical backgrounds, and we just kept interviewing people that were really interesting that had career shifts and trying to anticipate, okay, based on these ones, what are you seeing going forward? And lo and behold, we realized that we were aggregating this huge list of amazing people that have done awesome things at different times in the industry. And it's turning into you can go subscribe to this and basically have mentoring sessions with all these interesting people that have done great things at scale. And that's what I love about the podcast. And that's why we keep recording it, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Completely agree. Now, let's kind of shift gears, if you will. I'm not going to rehash Intel SDI Group because we've had Jonathan on the show, Jonathan Donaldson, and Nick Weaver has been on the show a bunch of times and is a kind of a regular guest, if you will, and guest host. So I don't feel there's really a need to go into that specifically, but I wanted to dig into, Nick did a blog post back in December around the announcement of a telemetry framework called Intel Snap. And before we dig into that, though, I wanted to dig into the concepts behind it and how it came to be. A little bit of theory versus reality. We'll start with the theory. And there's this concept of IRO, Intelligent Resource Orchestration. And the phases of it, and I'll kind of list them all out, and then we can kind of talk about it a little bit more, and specifically watching, deciding, acting, and learning. And so, what is your thoughts around that specifically, and what was the kind of the need for IRO versus things that are out there in the industry already today?
It's such a great question, and it really comes to a point of view of where are we coming from as Intel, right? As Intel, we want you to continue to consume and produce, cloud computing platforms. But what Nick's theory is outlining here is that you start by understanding the value you can get from your current investment. And that means you need to be able to look at a great multitude of information about your systems. This is what makes, the tier one cloud providers win right now. It's they get the most money out of their current investment. And that then goes into, you start watching it, and then you decide based on the information you're able to consume from that system that's been standardized and aggregated and rolled up in queryable ways. So that decision making has to happen somewhere. And then the acting is like, okay, so you've made a decision, you've come to a conclusion about what you should or shouldn't do in your infrastructure. What are you going to do about it? And it's a really compelling theory of practical places to improve and kind of API parameters or perimeters across the three areas. And then the learning is all around. You can learn in a sort of smaller phases. You can learn to watch more specific information as you consume vast quantities of raw information and start noticing that there are certain correlations between layers, and you can improve upon that. Or you can also learn like what to watch and how acting on it changes things for the better. So you can look at it across all three layers, but also as each one as a modular unit of possible improvement.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And so as I was reading Nick's blog, and I'm always about trying to break things down into something maybe a little bit easier to understand or certainly better ways to kind of transfer that knowledge, if you will. And so the way I kind of look at it is watching is a set of eyes, right? It is watching that data stream or that data flow, and then deciding is kind of a bit of a brain for me of how do you not just see all this data coming in, but actually kind of go, oop, that's good, or oop, that's bad. And then acting is a little bit like hands, right? A little bit of taking those decisions and turning them into an action that needs to happen. And then the learning one is certainly the most interesting thing for me, because I think up until now, that is an area that certainly has the most growth without a doubt. And so where I'll go with that, though, is so if I use a human analogy around all of that, is Nick trying to create Terminators? Is this SkyNet?
I'll be back with an answer a little later, but because it, the learning aspect. I mean, that's what's going to come. That's when the robots kill the world, right? No, I'm just kidding. But seriously, yeah, it's really interesting to see these, the cloud native environments and the standardization happening around containers. So once containers become a more standardized deployable object that's been blessed by a large group of people, you can start watching it in more predictable ways. And then if you can watch something, you can then decide on it. And then the acting on it becomes very natural because you have clear boundaries of what one thing is versus another. And then the learning, standardization improves all four of these areas. And with Snap, we designed a standardized framework for telemetry, or we can call it metrics, but telemetry is certain raw or aggregate information from any layer in your infrastructure. And we did this because we found that to be the very first step in enabling people to improve their intelligent resource orchestration.
Yep, makes sense. And so I guess that's probably a good turning point to actually talk about the Snap Framework a little bit. So Snap Framework, for those that aren't familiar with it, it was announced in December at Tectonic Summit, wasn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. Tectonic Summit.
And so this actually brings to life the stages we just mentioned through the concept of framework plugins. So there is collecting, which would basically match up to watching. There is processing, which would match up to deciding, and then there's publishing, which would kind of maybe sort of match up to acting. If I'm making a 1-for-1 correlation, I honestly don't know that it is a 1-for-1 correlation. I'm gonna kind of flip that back to you.
Yeah.
But there is those three different kinds of plugins, without a doubt. And if you don't mind expanding on those a bit.
Yeah, Aaron, it's really interesting you tried to map it that way. I'm making slides about this right now. I flip between our code base and PowerPoint right now quite a lot, which tells you more about developer advocacy, because I'm trying to tell like a really quality story about these things. And when we're talking about Snap, though, we're talking just about the watching phase, that there needs to be a better way to collect telemetry throughout the data center in a standard, uniform, normalized format. The deciding, acting, and learning, there are all little hints at it throughout Snap, but the core of what we're doing, we just want you to be able to watch it and put it to a persistent medium that you normally would do that already. So say you already have, an infrastructure deployed, and your standard, what you baked into your AMI, or your deploy system is collect-D. And collect-D is collecting, and you're aggregating it and doing some sort of rsync and passing it over, and that ends up rolling up into something that you store in like Rethink DB or some sort of, or Influx DB for a time series database. You're aggregating that information and storing it in places. But what if you want something else? Like, what if you have Heka deployed as well? What if you also are using Factor for Puppet? What if you're running Docker containers and you want to start snagging some information from there that there isn't a plugin already built around? Or if you want to use a new plugin, but you don't want to have to reload the framework and possibly, change the endpoints. So Snap is a framework built of collectors, processors, and publishers that are all modular and non-blocking. So as you edit any of them, as you change the tasks of what they're doing and collecting, you actually just on the fly will update without any reboots, interrupts, any of that. So we really designed a modular framework that will be able to collect from all sorts of different platforms and put it into a single catalog of metrics that are queryable. And then you can publish it to any endpoint that we have a plugin for, or you write your own. They're actually quite easy to write.
Oh, and that's fantastic. And probably one of the biggest things, at least that I've seen personally in talking to customers too, is that concept of just the collecting stage just can be so ugly from all the different sources. And then it almost becomes kind of a custom workflow based on collecting, right? If I want to collect from Docker versus, collect from something else, I may have to do something unique in that workflow. And so what you're really doing there, if I understand this correctly, is really kind of normalizing these workflows so that you're always collecting from all these different various sources. And then through the processing and publishing plugins, you're kind of normalizing the backend data. Is that a correct way to look at it?
You nailed it. Absolutely. Because so current collectors, to take a few that we have right now and just say, okay, let's say you wanted to collect things from an Intel specific hardware information you can pull. We've got Intel Node Manager that has information about, everything from your power utilization on your CPU to how much your power is being utilized by memory. So real low level temperature and power consumption information. And you also want to, pick that up next to like PSUtil, common utility to snag some information about your operating environment, your CPU load, the system mode it's in. So these can be just flags. These can be aggregate numbers. These can be numbers that are given at just some point. So what's like the average load in the last minute? That's one that comes out of PSUtil. And you want to take all of those and send them downstream. And to your point, Aaron, like the pain at times is just, how do I query that once I have it? Because it's in so many different formats from so many different platforms that were never designed to, correlate with each other necessarily. So we've got this concept of a metric catalog. So every collector plugin has some sort of namespace dedicated to whatever it is. So /Intel /PSUtil the metric that you want to gather. Say PSUtil /load of 1 for the last 1 minute, or load 15, which is another one. And then you can query that downstream. If you want everything from PSUtil, you'd push it to your database and you'd query everything to that point, the PSUtil. If you want to grab things from other things, you star from there. So the idea that you have it in a single uniform and clean sort of structure that you can query downstream is just, we find that incredibly empowering and a story that people find very compelling.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting to me as well, and to kind of your credit as well, kind of realizing early on that you want to kind of head down this developer path. I mean, at the end of the day, what we're doing is all empowered from, at the very most basic level as an API, right? And we are getting away from this idea of a bunch of utilities that all kind of, if I'm a data center operator, a bunch of utilities that all kind of do its own query and does this and does that. We're getting to this idea of universal APIs collected through a universal framework and then being able to be queried and pulled out of from there. And it's one big database for the data center for operations.
Yeah. And I also want to say, though, there's so much strength from coming from an operations background and understanding the pain of IT operations. Because another point we didn't even get into, which we're really proud of about Snap, is that it's designed to be updated and dynamic. So a task is the thing in which you define the collector, processor, publisher workflow. And you can change a task on the fly. You can update plugins on the fly, and a task will continue to run and pull the next rev. You can pin to certain revs, or you can actually administrate these at scale using tribes, which are ways of saying some number of snapd daemons are part of a single tribe. And when I update a plugin on one tribe member, it actually propagates to the others. So this is actually really interesting because of the operational pain. And anyone that comes from the IT admin, sysadmin background knows what operational pain is. So those skills are still super valuable. They're just evolving, right? Like it's changing to an API perimeter instead of, which virtual system and which operating system are we running?
Yep. Makes sense. And so then, since its release in December, what are some of kind of the early use cases, and when and where does Intel envision folks actually using this framework, and for what purposes specifically?
Yeah, I mean, the extensibility is nearly endless, which is also part of why software systems like this can be overwhelming at first.
Right, exactly. It's I'm kind of that is one of those things that almost can be everything to everyone. Right.
Yeah.
So where do people start?
So you have to have a problem, right? Like, let's be realistic, and that's part of what the storyteller as a developer advocate that I need to continue to do for us is tell the stories of what are pains and how does this help solve them. So this is really a question of you're running a cloud environment, probably on premises, private cloud, maybe a hybrid cloud. And you're trying to be able to see across a diverse set of systems. And you have an idea of, when these things happen, I need to change this stuff. One example that came up pretty early on was a VMware admin who's very familiar with the VMware API, wanted to also get down to the smarts data on their disks on their servers. And they thought of Snap as a way to be able to get that smarts data because we have a collector plugin for that. And maybe if you start seeing some smarts data from your disks, start saying that, hey, this disk might be going out soon, you can, mark it at a higher level to say, let's stop deploying to that server. And it's really interesting, right? Because there's some correlation downstream you have to think about, and we're not to the point of solving that problem for you, but just the idea of empowering people to realize they can aggregate all types of diverse information and then pass it to something which could decide on it later. That's what we want to get to right now. There are a lot of people doing POCs right now, and unfortunately I don't have many I can talk about just yet. But you can, if you go on GitHub and look at the teams that have starred the repo, we're at 500 plus stars, and you start looking at the companies that are doing it, you'll start thinking of really interesting use cases on your own, and I'll let your imagination run wild there.
Nice. And so I actually my next question was going to be, how has the community embraced this? But you kind of answered that one. But so I'll kind of flip it back to you personally. You've been in the role a couple months now. Is that correct?
Yeah, I've been at Intel since November.
Okay.
I joined pretty quickly in order to help get documentation and sort of use cases mapped out a bit more for Snap and help with that, that softer side of the development lifecycle in our GitHub repo.
So what challenges do you specifically face to date as a developer advocate, and what's next for both Snap and the SDI group in general that you kind of is on your radar and is your, 6 to 12 month kind of roadmap, if you will, for you?
Oh, yeah. No, I love that question. So what I'm facing right now is, prioritizing the stories we tell. And I'm trying to get an understanding of who's interested in Snap and why are they interested. And I want to share those stories of why they're interested to get other people thinking about why they should be interested. So right now we've got a team of people that are working very closely with external to Intel engineering teams. We also have a ton of engineering teams inside Intel, as you can imagine, that are also interested in standardizing telemetry gathering across all sorts of devices that we create, and trying to bring that all together in a way that tells a compelling story. So some days that's, I'm writing blog posts, and I'm actually going to start doing a blog specifically for our team and getting people like the distributed systems engineers that work on Mesos on our team to start talking about why that's cool and why that's related. But also just like have a 101, why should I care about telemetry conversations as well. So I want to get more content out there, but I've mostly been working on speaking engagements because I think there's really, when it comes to any open source project, if you build it, they won't come. I don't believe in the field of dreams in open source anymore.
Sure.
There's just too many options. So you've got to be really great at communicating why your option is wise and to whom it's wise to. And I want to get ahead of that as much as possible because I think there's a great story for Snap and for other projects we're working on to fit into the much larger ecosystem at play.
Yeah, that's a great point. And because it's been kind of a long running kind of, if people listen to this show over time, they can actually get some trends around the questions we kind of ask. And it's actually kind of funny. One of the questions we always ask a lot of the startups, and now we've started to ask all the open source project people that we've had on the show as well, is we always like to ask them, and the what problem do you solve question, because you can tell how much thought they've put into it ahead of time with how readily they answer that question. And sometimes you can almost immediately determine success or failure in the future based on how succinct and how clear that answer is at times.
Yeah, I hope I passed that litmus test.
You did, man.
I also want to do the same thing. I think to go full circle back to the job title developer advocate, I think the litmus test for why you need a developer advocate is because right now, if you go to some of these other like really exciting open source projects, the code might be flawless, but you're either seeing README files that it either looks like the developer never got to the to-do items that they wrote in there. It literally just says to do, which honest to God, it said that in November for most of Snap, and the team was amazing at, rallying together and building it out. But it's either that or you have open source project that went through the marketing department, and some of the phraseology that comes out of that, it just looks like cloud confetti. There's just a mess of stuff on the screen that doesn't really make sense to the technical people that want to use it. So I think developer advocacy is crucial these days to making sure the right audience has got the right level of detail so that they have the scaffolding to begin and improve upon a project.
Yep, I agree. And so the word of the day is phraseology, by the way. I love that.
I like making up words.
All right. With that, I think we're out of time for this week. Matt, where can everyone find out more about you, about Intel, about Snap?
Yeah, well, I'll send you some links to Snap. We're on GitHub under the Intel SDI X team. X is the emerging trend side. And then personally, I'm podcasting almost weekly on the Geek Whisperers, which is @_Geek Whisperers, or no, @Geek_Whisperers. And then you can find me on Twitter @MJBrender or on GitHub that way too.
Awesome. All right. Thank you very much for your time. On behalf of Brian, who wasn't able to make it this week, thanks for listening, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.